Jeff Kennett was Victorian Premier for 2 terms. Even his enemies on the Labor side, I suspect, would admit that he was a can-do leader in that time. And after politics, he became chairman of Beyond Blue. He knows about mental distress. It's a kind of distress caused by lockdowns. I spoke to him a short while ago. Jeff Kennett, thank you so much for your time. Daniel Andrews seems to be really popular in the polls because he seems so tough in fighting the coronavirus. My question is this: if he's so good, why is Victoria doing so badly?
Well, that's an interesting question and conundrum. My simple advice, Andrew, to you is don't believe the polls. I think this latest lockdown is very savage. It's universal throughout the state. The damage it is causing is enormous, and my great worry is when Wednesday comes, if he removes the lockdown and there are 2 or 3 cases after that, what's he going to do? Is he going to lock us down again, or is he going to publicly admit that what he's done this time has been over the top and unnecessary? I suspect one of the reasons we have the total state lockdown right now is because the police force were simply not in a condition to be able to put in either the ring of steel around the metropolitan area or to man all of the roads leading around the state. So I think this has been a knee-jerk reaction to a few cases, not that they shouldn't be taken seriously, but I think you and I have always said that this virus had to be managed, as they're doing in New South Wales, rather than causing the disruption to so many families and businesses that's continuing to occur today.
I agree. You just need to look over the border if you're in Victoria and see how it can be done without shutting down a whole state. This is incredible. What are the key mistakes that you have seen so far?
Andrew, I'm worried that we are not always getting the truth and that we're being misled. So, for instance, when they put the lockdown into place, they said that it would be for 5 days only, and yet the order to allow that to occur is dated the 26th of February. In other words, it potentially is already ordained that this lockdown could be extended to the 26th. Now, why didn't they tell us about that when they said we were going into lockdown for 5 days, firstly? Secondly, I've given you a reason why I think the whole state has been locked down. It hasn't been because there's a threat of a spread. Some of our towns near the borders, Gippsland, Mildura, etc., haven't had cases for months. And I think the third worry I have with all of this is the Premier's argument that this virus, this particular natured virus out of the UK, spread so much faster. Yes, it may spread faster, but it doesn't justify the words that he used when he was announcing the lockdown. It was almost as though we were all going to be eaten by it if we weren't locked down. And I think, again, he's exaggerated the speed at which the virus might travel to suit his own purpose. So, again, it comes back to the original question. These viruses are going to be with us for the rest of time in one form or another. We've got to learn to manage them. And I don't think it's right that every Victorian should be paying the price for the failures of the government and an autocratic Premier because they are failing to provide the protection and the associations that we need.
You mentioned the government losing trust, your trust certainly, and whether it's telling the truth. When I asked you about mistakes, let me roll those two things, mistakes and trust, in this question. Who do you believe? The man with the nebuliser who says he was allowed to use that nebuliser for his asthma when he was in quarantine, where that then spread the virus, or the government which says he wasn't allowed to?
Andrew, I've got to say I believe the patient. I believe the 30-year-old. I feel very sorry for Emma Casa, who has now been appointed in some senior role in managing this virus. She's a very good, honest woman with a lot of training. And Daniel really threw her under the bus the other day. She said she wasn't thrown under the bus, but he pulled away from the interview and let her do one separately. I don't understand it. I don't understand why everyone else is wrong and everyone else has behaved incorrectly, except those who have responsibility for governing the state. Again, as I say, at the moment, the people paying the penalty for this are the public of Victoria, 6 million of them, regardless of where they live. And yet the Premier still is prepared to blame other people and then not apologise. Why would you not believe a 30-year-old man? Why does everything he said have to be written down on a piece of paper somewhere to justify his claim? I just don't understand it.
Jeff Kennett, you mentioned that he threw the head of the quarantine hotels under the bus, making her do a press conference on her own to resolve this issue of who's telling the truth about how it started. There seems to be a pattern. His health minister, he keeps blaming someone else. So his health minister let him down, she got dumped. His head of department didn't tell the truth, he got dumped. Now blaming the head of the quarantine hotels. At what stage do you think the person who should be dumped, the person who should quit or be sacked or whatever it is, should be Daniel Andrews?
Under the Westminster system, a leader, in this case a Premier, has to accept the responsibility of his department and his government. There has been no other leader whose administration, whose autocratic administration, his personal fingerprints on everything that happened, led to the second quarantine disaster, which led to 800 lives lost and, of course, the loss of businesses. We're now back in a different scenario, and I'm sure things have improved in many cases. But can you just imagine if it was Sky News who, because of one of their acts of mismanagement, led to the loss of one life of their employee? How quickly Daniel Andrews and the government would bear down on you. They would take you to court. You'd either be fined and or jailed, which are the provisions that they've put into place in an act here in Victoria, and yet they won't apply it to themselves. So I'm just saying this is the most incredible exhibition of double standards. Now, I don't say this personally against Daniel Andrews at all. I say it against the principle of good government, of responsible government, and the acceptance of personal responsibility. There is no moral acceptance of any responsibility, sadly, by Daniel Andrews.
At some stage, Daniel Andrews, he failed again. People have died. I think you've got to take responsibility. You've got to go. Jeff Kennett, thank you so much indeed for your time.
Pleasure. Have a very good evening.